For years, one question echoed through Flagstaff with a power no argument or confrontation ever managed to achieve. It was not shouted, not dramatic, and not rehearsed. It was quiet, almost casual, and yet devastating in its impact. What does the nanny do? When Christine Brown asked that question, she unknowingly dismantled a carefully constructed illusion. At the time, viewers laughed, debated, and speculated. But looking back now, that single sentence marked the beginning of the end. The confusion was understandable. Why would Robin, a woman without a conventional job for over a decade and a husband who was almost permanently present, require paid household help? The question lingered, unresolved, as relationships deteriorated and the Brown family slowly unraveled. Today, however, the mystery has evolved. The real issue is no longer what the nanny did. The far more unsettling question is this: who took her place when the money ran out? All signs suggest the professional help is gone. The payroll has dried up. And in a twist that feels disturbingly close to a modern-day cautionary fairy tale, the responsibility appears to have shifted to the one person in that household who has never been allowed the power to refuse. This is not a story about convenience. It is a story about control, dependency, and a quiet transformation hiding in plain sight. To understand what may be happening to Aurora Brown, we must revisit the rules that once governed Cody Brown's household. In earlier seasons, those rules were ruthless in their simplicity. Adult children, particularly sons, were given ultimatums. Once they turned 18, they were expected to leave or submit to strict, often unreasonable conditions. Garrison and Gabriel were not offered patience or understanding. They were pushed out, emotionally and physically, under the banner of responsibility and independence. The fallout was painful to watch. Relationships fractured. Trust eroded. The family structure weakened. Yet today, an undeniable contradiction stands at the center of the narrative. Aurora is an adult, well beyond the age at which those same rules were enforced with brutal efficiency. And yet, she remains firmly inside the home. Not drifting in and out, not temporarily staying, but embedded. Many viewers are quick to label this as favoritism. They argue that Robin's children are treated differently, protected more fiercely, and granted privileges denied to others. While that may be partially true, favoritism alone does not fully explain what we are seeing. This does not resemble a young adult being gently supported while preparing for independence. It looks like something else entirely. Watch closely, and patterns emerge. Aurora is consistently present, assisting, managing, accommodating. Her role appears functional rather than transitional. The question becomes unavoidable: is she being sheltered, or is she being relied upon? To answer that, we must confront the financial reality behind the closed doors. For years, the family operated on a collective income model. Multiple adult earnings, television revenue, business ventures, promotions, flowed into a shared financial pool. That system subsidized a lifestyle that included large properties, expensive tastes, and paid assistance. But that system no longer exists. Christine left. Yanel left. Mary eventually walked away. Those departures were not only emotional losses, they were financial earthquakes. 3 major income streams vanished, leaving behind heavy obligations: land payments, property taxes, and the ongoing costs of maintaining a lifestyle built for a much larger financial base. Quiet whispers from Flagstaff suggest the family budget was not merely adjusted, it was slashed. And when money disappears, the first comforts to go are always the invisible ones. Outsourced labor does not survive financial collapse. A private nanny, costing thousands per month, becomes an impossible luxury. Evidence suggests the nanny quietly exited the picture months ago. But the workload did not leave with her. Robin has repeatedly stated that she struggles to manage the household alone. She has described herself as overwhelmed and emotionally drained. And Cody Brown's stance on domestic labor has been clear for years. He does not clean. He does not cook. He does not manage the home. So the question becomes painfully simple. If the paid help is gone, and the adults refuse to assume the work, who does it? Labor always falls along the path of least resistance. It lands on the individual conditioned to comply, to keep the peace, and to place others' needs above their own. This is where the narrative takes its darkest turn. There is growing speculation that Aurora has not simply taken on extra chores. The suggestion is far more serious. Observers believe she may have absorbed the nanny's responsibilities in full. Not occasional help, but systemic labor, the daily operation of the household. Consider what that involves. Younger children who are often treated as far younger than their actual ages require constant supervision. Morning routines, school preparation, emotional regulation. Meals must be planned and prepared, often around an unconventional schedule. The house itself is large, cluttered, and demanding to maintain. That alone can constitute a full-time workload. Most troubling of all is the allegation of a nighttime caregiving role. Reports suggest Aurora may be on call during the night, responding to anxiety and emotional needs, tasks that would typically fall under the responsibility of a paid professional. If true, this reframes the entire situation. This is no longer family cooperation. It is unpaid labor replacing paid employment. The psychological context cannot be ignored. Aurora was raised in an environment where obedience is praised, compliance is rewarded, and dissent is framed as disloyalty. In such a system, choice becomes an illusion. Saying no feels like betrayal. The cage may be comfortable, even luxurious, but it is still a cage. What makes this especially troubling is what it steals. Young adulthood is meant to be a time of growth, independence, and self-discovery. Instead, Aurora appears anchored to a role she never formally chose, one that benefits others while quietly consuming her autonomy. This is not simply a story about money or household dynamics. It is a story about power and hierarchy. When financial systems collapse, they expose the truth of who is valued and who is used. The nanny may be gone, but the labor remains. And someone is paying the price, just not in wages. The question now is not whether this transformation has happened. It is how long it can continue before the cost becomes impossible to ignore. It is well known among longtime viewers that Ariella is a night owl. Both Cody and Robin have spoken openly about her habit of staying awake well into the early hours of the morning. They have framed it as a challenge, a source of exhaustion, and yet the question that follows is rarely asked aloud. If Robin is sleeping in, something fans have long suspected, supported by her frequent late appearances during routine filming, then who is supervising a child at 1 o'clock in the morning? Who is preparing snacks, calming emotions, and managing the inevitable chaos of a restless household while the supposed head of the home is resting? The emerging theory is both unsettling and difficult to ignore. The suggestion is that Aurora is the one on duty. While the rest of the household sleeps, Aurora is allegedly managing the emotional and physical needs of her younger siblings, quietly acting as a buffer between the children and an already volatile Cody. This is not a matter of occasional help. If true, it is a systematic transfer of responsibility that would normally belong to a parent or a paid professional. This brings us to what can only be described as visual forensics, because this is where the narrative stops being speculative and starts becoming disturbingly visible. To see it, viewers must stop focusing on the obvious distractions. Ignore Cody's outbursts. Look past Robin's tears. Shift your attention to the background. Watch Aurora. When footage from recent episodes is examined side by side, a striking contrast emerges, what some observers have called the modern Cinderella effect. In one frame, we see Robin in her solo interviews. She appears immaculate. Her hair is professionally styled, her curls set with precision. She wears new jewelry, her nails are manicured, and her skin looks rested. Everything about her appearance communicates care, leisure, and maintenance. She looks like someone whose needs are being met. She looks, quite plainly, like the woman at the center of the household. Now contrast that image with Aurora in the same time period. In multiple clips, she lingers at the edge of the frame, hovering near the kitchen, seated quietly on the sofa, present but never centered. The difference is jarring. Dark circles sit beneath her eyes, resistant to makeup. Her posture is slumped, shoulders curved forward as if bracing under invisible weight. Her expression is tense, her energy drained. This is not the awkwardness of being filmed. This is not youthful moodiness. This is the unmistakable face of burnout. The question practically asks itself, Why does a woman in her early 20s, someone who should be discovering independence, pursuing education, forming relationships, and exploring her own identity, look as though she has been carrying adult responsibility for far too long? The physical toll is visible, but the psychological signals may be even more revealing. There is one body language cue that appears again and again. Watch carefully the next time Aurora speaks in front of Cody or Robin. Almost without exception, she glances at Robin first. It is quick, subtle, almost imperceptible, but it is there. She checks Robin's face before finishing a sentence, before expressing a thought, before fully committing to her words. This is not coincidence. It is a reflex born of pressure. That glance is a search for approval. A silent question. Was that acceptable? Did I say the right thing? It is the behavior of someone operating in a high-stakes environment where approval is conditional and mistakes carry consequences. It suggests that Aurora's place within the household is not secure by virtue of being a daughter, but dependent on performance, on usefulness. While the mother appears to flourish, acquiring new artwork, jewelry, and comforts, the daughter appears to diminish. This is a textbook example of an energy-draining dynamic, where one person's comfort is maintained by another's quiet depletion. And it is unfolding openly, on national television, in a way that becomes more disturbing the longer it is ignored. To understand how such a dynamic can persist, we must look beyond surface behavior and into the psychology that sustains it. This is where the story moves from uncomfortable observation into something far more serious. This is where the concept of the loyalty contract comes into play. Over the last several seasons, Cody Brown's language has undergone a noticeable shift. He no longer speaks primarily about love. Instead, his vocabulary is dominated by the concept of loyalty. Partnership has been replaced by obedience. Affection is no longer presented as something freely given, but something earned, and the price is absolute submission. Time and again, he has made it clear that disagreement is not tolerated. Independence is framed as betrayal. We have already seen the consequences for the children who refused to pay that price. Garrison, Gabriel, and others expressed opinions, maintained outside relationships, and challenged authority. In response, they were labeled disloyal and pushed out, emotionally first, then physically. Now consider Aurora's position. Why is she allowed to remain within the safety of the large house when her brothers were shown the door? The answer may lie in a darker but entirely plausible explanation. Aurora is permitted to stay because she provides tangible value. Her presence is not sentimental, it is functional. In this framework, the house is no longer a family home for her. It is a workplace. Her worth is measured not by who she is, but by what she contributes. Cody's approval appears linked not to fatherly affection, but to her utility in preserving the household's daily operation. It is important to draw a clear distinction here, one that is often deliberately blurred. There is a difference between chores and servitude. In a healthy family, responsibilities are shared. Everyone helps out. Dishes are washed, floors are vacuumed, and tasks rotate. That is normal and healthy. Servitude, however, is something else entirely. Servitude occurs when one person's labor exists primarily to support another person's comfort and leisure. If the widely discussed theories are even partially accurate, if Robin is sleeping late, spending her days shopping or disengaged, while Aurora shoulders the burden of childcare, emotional regulation, and deep cleaning, then this is not shared responsibility. It is exploitation. Such a system conditions the child to exist for the parent's ease. It teaches that love is earned through exhaustion and obedience. Over time, this erodes identity, autonomy, and self-worth. Viewed through this lens, moments from past episodes take on a far more troubling meaning. Scenes that once felt merely uncomfortable now appear loaded with implication. The dynamics were always there. We simply lacked the context to see them clearly. And once that context is established, it becomes impossible to look away. She cannot simply walk away, because the life surrounding her has been deliberately structured to make leaving financially and emotionally impossible. There is a well-documented psychological phenomenon that helps explain what appears to be happening with the younger children, Solomon and Ariella. It is known as parentification. This occurs when a child or young adult is forced into a parental role, taking on responsibilities that rightly belong to the actual parents, allowing those parents to withdraw from accountability. Viewers have repeatedly observed Aurora soothing the younger children, regulating their emotions, and stepping in during moments of distress. Her role increasingly resembles that of a third parent, or, in some respects, the primary one. This is not subtle. It is not speculative. It is visible, repeated, and consistent. Public reaction to this dynamic has reached boiling point. Across forums, comment sections, and social platforms, audiences are no longer persuaded by the image of a harmonious household. Many are using stark language to describe what they see: unpaid labor, coercive control, and financial abuse disguised as family loyalty. The dominant sentiment is not admiration, it is alarm. To many observers, Aurora appears to be actively hindered by the very person who should be preparing her for independence. Rather than encouraging her to build a future of her own, Robin appears to have fostered fear of the outside world. The message, whether explicit or implied, is that the world beyond the house is dangerous, hostile, and unsafe, that other family members cannot be trusted, and that the only true security exists within the walls of the large Flagstaff home. This creates what can only be described as a golden cage. Comfortable on the surface, restrictive at its core. And perhaps the most tragic aspect of all is that Aurora may not recognize her situation as captivity. She has been conditioned to believe that sacrifice equals virtue, that exhaustion equals loyalty, and that self-denial is proof of love. She likely views her role as noble, even necessary. Any impulse toward independence may be immediately followed by guilt, a sense that prioritizing herself would somehow endanger the family. This is how such systems sustain themselves. Control becomes internalized. The individual begins to police their own behavior, suppressing their needs without being explicitly told to do so. It is quiet, insidious, and deeply damaging. If we follow this pattern to its logical conclusion, the outlook becomes deeply concerning. Without intervention or change, the future offers very little hope. This brings us to the most unsettling possibility of all, the long-term grooming of Aurora into a role she may never escape. Within fundamentalist polygamist cultures, there exists a grim term, the basement wife. She is the woman who exists out of sight, stripped of status, tasked with the most demanding labor, and valued solely for her service to the patriarch and the favored wife. While this family no longer practices polygamy in its traditional form, the underlying hierarchy may simply have shifted across generations. The concern is that Aurora is being positioned as permanent help, the one who stays. Consider the timeline. Ariella is still very young. If Aurora is the designated caretaker, responsible for school routines, emotional regulation, and nighttime supervision, she could remain locked into this role for another 10 years or more. By the time Ariella reaches adulthood, Aurora will be well into her 30s. At that point, what will remain? She may have missed the formative years that allow young adults to build careers, relationships, and financial independence. No university experience. No early work history. No savings. No identity formed outside the household. She could wake up one day with no resume, no safety net, and no understanding of life beyond the walls she never left. What makes this scenario especially heartbreaking is that Aurora likely believes this is her responsibility. Years of emotional messaging have reinforced an us versus them mentality, one where the family is under siege, misunderstood, and dependent on her loyalty to survive. She may genuinely believe she is holding everything together. But in a healthy family, a parent would never ask a child to sacrifice their future to preserve a lifestyle. A parent would never require a daughter to burn herself out just to keep the adults comfortable. Aurora may believe she is being righteous, but righteousness that demands self-erasure is not virtue, it is exploitation. This leaves us with the unavoidable question at the center of this investigation.